On Thursday, January 15th, Beyond the Gates delivers one of its most emotionally loaded and relentlessly suspenseful episodes yet, an hour that doesn't just move the chess pieces across the board but flips the entire table, as Fairmont Crest wakes up under a heavy cloud of dread following the shocking events that closed the previous episode, with whispers of poison, betrayal, and long-buried secrets circulating through every hallway, bedroom, and backroom deal, and from the opening moments it's clear that nothing and no one is safe anymore, starting with Bill, who sits alone in the quiet kitchen staring at the glass of water Tomas warned him about, replaying every word of that frantic confrontation in his mind as doubt creeps in and love begins to curdle into suspicion, while elsewhere Haley moves through the house with an unsettling calm that borders on eerie. Her soft voice and measured smiles masking an internal panic she refuses to acknowledge, because if Bill truly believes Tomas, then everything she has carefully constructed, every lie, every manipulation, every calculated act of affection, could collapse in an instant, and yet instead of fleeing or lashing out, Haley doubles down on her performance, offering concern, tenderness, and just enough vulnerability to make Bill hesitate, which only heightens the tension as the audience watches him struggle between the woman he married and the nagging certainty that something is deeply wrong, a certainty that grows stronger when Bill quietly pours the water down the sink and notices a faint residue clinging to the glass, a detail so small yet so damning it sends a chill straight through him. Meanwhile, across town, the aftermath of Tomas's explosive accusation continues to ripple outward, with Randy visibly shaken after witnessing the fallout and increasingly desperate to keep his own role buried, knowing that if the truth about what he overheard, or what he knows about Haley's movements, comes out, he could be dragged down with her, and Randy's fear manifests in reckless decisions as he pressures a contact to destroy evidence and makes a call he immediately regrets, not realizing he's being watched from a distance by someone who has far more to gain from chaos than from silence, while at the hospital the atmosphere is just as heavy, as doctors hover around a still unconscious patient connected to the poisoning storyline, raising the stakes from suspicion to potential murder, and the clinical beeping of machines becomes a haunting reminder that this is no longer just a domestic dispute but a matter of life and death, and as word spreads, characters who once stood firmly in Haley's corner begin to question everything, especially Kat, whose sharp instincts have never failed her before and who cannot shake the sense that Haley's tears are rehearsed, her timing too perfect, her concern too selective, prompting Kat to quietly start piecing together a timeline that doesn't add up, while simultaneously grappling with her own unresolved trauma and the lingering fallout from the DNA revelations that have already fractured her sense of identity, and the emotional overload pushes Kat to a breaking point in a raw, tear-filled confrontation with Nicole, where mother and daughter, no longer certain of what that even means, cling to each other in a moment of fragile honesty that briefly cuts through the darkness consuming Fairmont Crest, but peace is short-lived on Beyond the Gates. Because just as emotions settle, another bomb is dropped when Andre learns new information about his birth father that directly contradicts everything he's been told, setting him on a collision course with Stan Richardson's shadowy past and reopening wounds that never truly healed, and Andre's quiet rage simmers beneath the surface as he begins asking questions no one wants to answer. The questions that threaten to unravel not just his family, but the entire network of alliances that have kept certain truths buried for decades, while Leslie, ever the master of controlled chaos, watches all of this unfold with calculating eyes, realizing that the growing distrust around Haley provides the perfect smokescreen for her own agenda, and she subtly nudges events along with well-placed comments and strategic silences, pushing people toward confrontation while keeping her own hands clean, at least for now. And as the episode builds toward its climax, Bill finally confronts Haley in a scene, crackling with tension, not with accusations, but with carefully chosen questions designed to test her reactions, and Haley, sensing the trap, responds with wounded indignation that might convince anyone else, but Bill sees something flicker in her eyes. Fear, not for him, but for herself, and in that moment the truth becomes undeniable, even if he isn't yet ready to say it out loud. And the hour barrels forward with mounting urgency as Tomas's earlier warning echoes through multiple storylines, tying together characters who don't yet realize they're part of the same nightmare until the final moments deliver a chilling cliffhanger. A lab result is handed over, a phone vibrates with an anonymous message reading "You're next," and Haley is shown alone at last, her mask slipping as she stares into the mirror, rage and desperation warring across her face, confirming that whatever she started, she's nowhere near finished. And as the screen fades to black, Beyond the Gates leaves viewers with the unmistakable promise that Fairmont Crest is on the brink of all-out war, where love becomes a weapon, trust is a liability, and survival may depend on who's willing to tell the truth first, or who's willing to kill to keep it buried. Picking up where the tension leaves off and plunging even deeper into the psychological wreckage of Thursday's January 15th episode, Beyond the Gates continues to spiral into a masterclass of slow-burn dread and operatic emotion as the anonymous threat reverberates through Fairmont Crest like a ticking clock no one can shut off, because once that message, "You're next," lands, paranoia becomes contagious, infecting even the most composed residents with a gnawing sense that danger is no longer theoretical but actively circling, and Bill, though outwardly steady, begins quietly preparing for a future he never imagined, making copies of documents, changing passwords, and leaving coded voice notes for himself as if he already knows that trusting the wrong person could cost him everything, while Haley, increasingly boxed in by suspicion and circumstance, oscillates between icy calculation and near-hysterical panic, her every move scrutinized by eyes she once believed were loyal, and yet instead of retreating she grows bolder, manipulating conversations, planting doubts about Tomas's credibility, and subtly rewriting history in a way that might have worked if not for the fact that cracks are now visible everywhere, especially when Danny overhears a conversation that contradicts Haley's carefully curated version of events and begins to question her own silence, realizing that staying out of it may no longer be an option. While at the same time the hospital storyline takes a darker turn as a test result suggests the substance involved wasn't accidental or easily traceable, raising chilling implications about premeditation and access, which immediately narrows the suspect pool and puts several characters on edge, particularly those with medical connections or pharmaceutical knowledge, and as rumors spread, friendships strain under the weight of unspoken accusations, with whispered conversations stopping abruptly when someone enters the room and long-standing alliances suddenly feeling fragile, almost disposable. Meanwhile, Andre's personal reckoning intensifies as he digs deeper into Stan Richardson's past, uncovering a trail of sealed records and deliberate erasures that suggest his birth father didn't just disappear but was systematically removed from the narrative, a realization that fuels Andre's anger and drives him to confront people who thought those skeletons were safely locked away, and his search for truth runs parallel to Kat's own emotional unraveling, as she begins to suspect that the poison plot, the DNA deception, and the sudden resurfacing of old secrets are not isolated events, but pieces of a much larger pattern of control exerted by a small group of people who have been shaping lives from the shadows. And this dawning awareness pushes Kat into dangerous territory as she considers making a move that could expose everything, even if it means destroying relationships she once fought to protect, while Leslie, ever observant, senses the shift in power and adjusts accordingly, subtly distancing herself from potential fallout while positioning herself as a confidant to those on the brink, extracting information with a gentle smile and sympathetic nod that hides her true intentions. And as the episode edges closer to its end, tension peaks in a quiet, devastating scene where Bill stands alone outside Fairmont Crest, staring at the house that once symbolized stability and now feels like a crime scene waiting to be processed. His phone lighting up with another message that confirms someone is watching his every move, and the final images cut rapidly between characters making pivotal decisions, Randy choosing whether to confess or flee, Danny reaching for her phone to call someone she swore she'd never speak to again, Andre opening a file that could shatter his identity, and Haley locking a door behind her with deliberate finality, before the screen fades to black. leaving viewers with the unmistakable sense that Thursday's episode isn't just another chapter, but the point of no return, the moment beyond the gates. Fully embraces its darkest instincts and dares its characters to survive the consequences of truths that have waited far too long to be told. And still the story refuses to slow, because the deeper Beyond the Gates pushes into Thursday's January 15th fallout, the clearer it becomes that Fairmont Crest itself is almost a living witness to the sins committed within its walls, as every corridor seems to echo with secrets, and every familiar face now carries the unsettling question of motive. And in the wake of Bill's growing certainty that the danger is not imagined but engineered, he begins quietly confiding in an unexpected ally, someone from his past whose loyalty was once tested and nearly broken, creating a fragile lifeline that could either save him or accelerate his downfall. While Haley, sensing control slipping through her fingers, shifts tactics entirely, abandoning subtlety in favor of emotional warfare as she weaponizes guilt, history, and shared memories, reminding Bill of everything they survived together and daring him to believe that she could be capable of such cruelty. Yet her desperation only sharpens the audience's awareness that she is cornered, because the more she insists on innocence, the more her behavior betrays calculation, and this becomes devastatingly clear in a private moment when she lashes out at an object in a room, the mask fully gone, revealing a fury that has been simmering beneath her polished exterior for far longer than anyone realized. Meanwhile, the anonymous threats expand beyond Bill, touching others who were never meant to be part of the original scheme, suggesting that whoever set these events in motion either underestimated the fallout or has deliberately chosen to widen the blast radius, and paranoia begins to fracture even the strongest bonds as longtime friends exchange uneasy glances and lovers question whether intimacy itself is now a liability, while at the hospital a subtle but terrifying update shifts the tone entirely, as a specialist quietly confirms that the poisoning method shows sophistication and intent, pointing towards someone who planned not just to harm but to ensure silence. And that revelation lands like a thunderclap for Kat, who suddenly replays every strange interaction, every convenient coincidence, and every time she was discouraged from asking questions, realizing that the truth may have been hiding in plain sight all along, and this realization fuels her decision to take a risk that could cost her everything, as she arranges a clandestine meeting with someone who knows the inner workings of Fairmont Crest better than anyone else. While Andre's parallel journey leads him to a confrontation that is both heartbreaking and explosive, as he demands answers from a figure who helped erase Stan Richardson from history, only to discover that the lie was never about protecting Andre, but about protecting someone far more powerful, a revelation that shatters his remaining illusions and hardens his resolve, pushing him closer to exposing a legacy of manipulation that predates him by decades. And through it all, Leslie remains a quiet constant, moving effortlessly between factions, offering comfort where needed and planting doubt where useful, her role becoming increasingly ambiguous as viewers are left to wonder whether she is merely exploiting the chaos or actively steering it toward a specific endgame. And as the episode's tension coils tighter, Randy finds himself at the center of a moral crossroads, haunted by Tomas's warning and the growing body count of secrets, knowing that staying silent may no longer guarantee his safety, while speaking up could make him the next target. And the hour crescendos with a chilling sequence that intercuts Bill discovering a hidden compartment he never knew existed, Haley making a call that could change the balance of power, and a final, ominous reveal that the poison was never meant for just one person, leaving the audience with a sinking realization that Thursday's January 15th episode is not simply about uncovering who did what, but about exposing how far certain characters are willing to go to maintain control, ensuring that Beyond the Gates hurtles forward into a future where innocence is extinct, trust is deadly, and every revelation carries the potential to destroy lives far beyond the original crime. And even after all that, Beyond the Gates still finds room to tighten the screws, because Thursday's January 15th episode doesn't just thrive on shock but on the slow, merciless unraveling of people who once believed they were untouchable, as the implications of the poison plot metastasize into something far more sinister, forcing every character to reassess not only who they trust, but who they truly are when survival becomes the priority. And Bill, now fully awake to the reality that his life may have been deliberately placed in jeopardy, begins replaying years of shared moments with Haley through a darker lens, recognizing patterns he once dismissed as stress or passion, and realizing with growing horror that manipulation often hides behind devotion, while Haley herself oscillates between defiance and dread, convinced that if she can just outmaneuver the next obstacle, she can still win. Unaware that the very people she once controlled are quietly comparing notes, connecting dots, and preparing for a reckoning she cannot stop, and this collective shift becomes evident when Danny, Kat, and Nicole find themselves aligned in uneasy agreement for the first time, united not by affection but by the shared understanding that the truth, however painful, must surface, even if it burns everything in its path. While the hospital storyline delivers another emotional gut punch as a fleeting moment of hope is undercut by a warning that recovery is far from guaranteed, reinforcing the terrifying reality that someone's actions have already crossed the point of no return, and this sobering update pushes Randy closer to the edge, his guilt manifesting in restless paranoia as he realizes that every delay, every half-truth, may be compounding the damage, and yet fear keeps him frozen, especially when he notices he's no longer alone in his anxiety, that someone else seems to know exactly what he's hiding. Meanwhile, Andre's investigation grows more dangerous as he uncovers proof that Stan Richardson's disappearance wasn't an isolated cover-up, but part of a broader pattern of erasure tied to influence, money, and power. A revelation that reframes Fairmont Crest not as a sanctuary for the elite, but as a carefully curated illusion built on silenced voices, and Andre's quiet determination to expose this legacy positions him as a wild card, someone capable of toppling pillars others assumed were permanent, while Leslie's role grows increasingly provocative as she begins subtly steering conversations toward confession, asking questions that sound supportive but are razor-sharp in their precision, making it clear that she is collecting leverage even as she pretends to offer solace. And as night falls over Fairmont Crest, the tension reaches a fever pitch in a series of intimate, wordless moments, Bill locking his bedroom door for the first time, Kat staring at a photograph that suddenly feels like evidence, Andre holding a file with hands that tremble not from fear but from resolve, and Haley standing alone in the dark, listening as the house settles around her, aware that the walls are closing in and that whatever move she makes next may be her last chance to control the narrative. And when the episode finally fades out, it does so not with closure but with a chilling sense of inevitability, making it unmistakably clear that Thursday's January 15th installment of Beyond the Gates is less about answers than about ignition, the moment the fuse is fully lit and the promise is made that the fallout will be catastrophic, personal, and impossible to contain, ensuring that Fairmont Crest will never return to the illusion of safety it once so carefully maintained. And yet the sense of inevitability only deepens as Beyond the Gates pushes further into the emotional wreckage left by Thursday's January 15th episode, because once the fuse is lit, every quiet moment becomes suspect, and every act of kindness feels like misdirection, and the characters begin to move as though they are already living inside the consequences of choices not yet revealed. With Bill increasingly isolating himself, not out of fear alone but out of clarity, as he finally understands that loving Haley may have blinded him to warning signs he was trained his entire life to recognize, and that realization cuts deeper than any physical threat, forcing him to grieve a marriage that may never have truly existed, while Haley, sensing the emotional distance growing between them, makes one last attempt to reassert control through intimacy and shared history, recounting pivotal moments of their relationship as if nostalgia itself could rewrite reality, but her words land hollow, echoing in the space between them, and the silence that follows becomes louder than any accusation. Meanwhile, Kat's quiet investigation brings her to an unsettling crossroads when she uncovers information that implicates someone she never imagined could be involved, forcing her to confront the painful truth that loyalty in Fairmont Crest has always been conditional, and that even those who claim to protect may have been complicit in harm, and this revelation shakes her to the core, driving her To confide in Nicole in a raw, unguarded moment that strips away years of resentment and replaces it with a shared resolve to survive what's coming, while Danny's role continues to evolve as she realizes that her proximity to the truth places her in danger whether she speaks or not, prompting her to make a quiet contingency plan of her own, one that suggests she has learned more from past betrayals than anyone realized. And as the narrative tightens, the hospital becomes a focal point once more, not just as a site of potential recovery or loss, but as a symbol of irreversible consequence, where whispered conversations in sterile hallways confirm that the poisoning has triggered a chain reaction no antidote can fully undo, reinforcing the idea that some damage lingers long after the immediate threat has passed, and Randy, increasingly unmoored by guilt, begins to unravel in ways that draw attention he cannot afford, snapping at allies and misreading threats, his paranoia escalating as he becomes convinced that confession may no longer buy safety, but silence may guarantee destruction, while Andre's storyline surges forward with a grim sense of purpose.